health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. I'm your host, Sara Banta. I'm a health coach, natural supplement expert, and a busy mom of three. Make sure you hit the subscribe button below so you're notified every week with my new podcast on Mondays and Tuesdays. And if you haven't already, join my free group coaching on Telegram with the link below. There's no downside. I teach you on a daily basis with tips and tools to enhance your health. You get to ask all your questions. I answer 7 days a week. Yeah, I do. I shouldn't, but I do. And you will be a part of an amazing like-minded group to support you on your journey, non-censored, in addition to truly taking control of your health. My goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. I cannot do it alone, so help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need my help, especially this one. I'm so excited. One of my mentors, one of my teachers, Teri Cochrane, is back, and she's the amazing author of The Wildatarian Diet. I live by her word. She has never failed me or my family with what we should and shouldn't be eating. She has advised world-class athletes and some of the top doctors and influencers around the world. Welcome, Teri. How are you today?
Hi, Sarah. So good to see you in such kind words. Thank you so much.
Well, it's true, and it's so funny. We're going to be talking about histamines today, and this is a topic that really I've never had an issue with in my life. No allergies. I have a lot of issues, right? Gut issues and other stuff. But I never had allergies. I never had the sniffles. I hardly ever sneeze, let alone anything like that. And as you know, I've got two people in my family that are very histamine sensitive, but things have changed.
Yes.
And in 2024, I am affected by histamines. Why? Because our world is not the same. And we are going to get into why. I mean, I had my appointment with you last fall, and you even told me that I shouldn't have salmon because it was too high fat and high in histamine. And I eat fish at least twice a week. It's my favorite meal. If my husband's out of town, I will eat it every single night. But I actually have stayed away from it because of the histamine response I had. So, and then these other healthy foods that people are eating that are causing this domino effect of the 5 disruptors that you talk about. And so I'm super excited to get into all of that. But to start out, why don't we just tell everybody what are histamines and why do we have them? If they're so bad for us, why is there something good about them?
So yes, the world has changed and we are very high histamine. Indeed, I would say 7 to 8 out of 10 of those that come through my clinic are now being impacted by histamine. And it doesn't mean a scratchy throat or itchy eyes or runny nose. I call it sneezing on the inside. It could be panic attacks, racing hearts, idiopathic anxiety disorder. It could be growing cysts on your ovaries because histamine increases estrogen burden. So what is a histamine? So a histamine is in the bucket of neurotransmitters along with serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine. And so in that bucket, and GABA, it's an excitatory neurotransmitter, meaning that it's going to elicit excitation in the body. And we have histamine response as an elicited response to something that the body is taking in and it doesn't like. So if you have something, the body holds the histamine in mast cells. These mast cells release, and then the histamine is there to warn the body this is not your match. But then what happens is that our adrenals come in and put in corticosteroids and then tap that histamine response down, and then we're back to homeostasis. Well, that's all been destroyed, for lack of a better word, but it is very much in trouble, if you will. The histamine homeostatic mechanism has been flattened right? There was a big bulldozer that came in and flattened it out. So we're not stable with histamine anymore. And myself included, I'd never had any histamine issues until this pandemic. Why? In the clinical literature, we now know that the spike protein turns on the HRH1, histamine receptor 1G. It's in the clinical literature. We're seeing it anecdotally here in my practice. So histamine is becoming a big deal, as you noted, you in the past, you and I have talked about the big four: sulfur, oxalate, fat, and protein metabolism impairment. But now I've added the fifth, the big five. Histamine has literally raised itself up to meet them because it cross reacts with the other guys. So it's a big deal.
So are you saying that the HRH1 is turned on when you have eat a histamine food or you have a reaction? But
Well,
now,
it can be both. If you have one, do you have a variance in that HRH1 polymorph SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism? If you have a variant, you're more likely to have it. However, in COVID, we're seeing the spike protein is eliciting that turning on of that gene. So if you have it, you're going to be much more highly susceptible. And there are other vectors of creating a histamine response through the other cross sections that the spike protein also elicits. So it's become a big deal. And we've seen so many people with mast cell reactivation syndrome that have never had mast cell issues before.
okay, so let's talk about all five of the disruptors and how they play in the body together, and this whole domino effect of things. I mean, I have had in the last couple months these reactions when I'm sitting and taking my first bite of dinner and I feel flushed or my heart starts racing. And I'm wondering if that is a response to the histamines.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting around how they have the domino effect is that, and this is very little known, but I believe we've cracked the code here on this as well, is that part of what we're seeing in the pandemic is just a massive onslaught of dysglycemia and insulin being way off. People's hemoglobin A1Cs are spiking, or they're hypoglycemic and their insulin is spiking. And guess what? Histamine intersects with insulin. And so insulin is now being dysregulated, and so is glucose metabolism and glycogen metabolism through the histamine receptor. So it's really fascinating. And before the pandemic, I worked with a Navy SEAL who was a type 1 diabetic, yet insulin wouldn't help him. And we figured out that he was having a fight or flight response, which is a histamine response, right? The adrenals and then histamine. And what helped him regulate his blood sugar was an antihistamine.
Oh my goodness. So what came first, the insulin dysregulation or the histamine response?
I believe they played together. And most recently, I worked with someone who has been a diabetic on insulin for over 20 years. And we were able to get him off his diet, get in concert with his doctors off of his diabetic medication. In 3 weeks, his insulin and glucose levels, or his glucose levels, returned to normal. Again, big histamine response. Then they were exposed to mold as they were traveling, and everything went crazy. Why? Because mold is a lipid, and it helps with oxalate metabolism, and oxalate and histamine intersect as well. And so he, all of a sudden, his blood sugar started going nuts, and more insulin was not touching it. And what we did again was, this time we supported him with a DAO enzyme for histamine. And we also supported him very significantly with an adrenal glandular and again, some biofilm breakers. Again, within a couple of days, his blood sugar normalized.
See, this is everyone listening. I have so many clients that come to me and say, Sarah, I haven't changed anything. My insulin resistance has increased, my cholesterol's increased, I've got fatty liver disease now, and all of these things without changing their diet. Now, fatty liver disease and insulin resistance have skyrocketed because uric acid, and I know you talk about that, and the processed foods and the spike protein, both of those things. But I want to get back to taking all of the disruptors and how they play with histamine. So oxalates, maybe you can tell us, what are oxalates, where do we find them, and then how do they affect the histamine response?
So oxalates are oxalic acid. It's a defense mechanism found in the plant kingdom. So they protect themselves. And by its nature, we used to create oxalobacter bacteria in our guts that would help us disassemble the oxalates, so then we could eat the nutrient-rich foods that carried those oxalates, such as almonds and berries and black beans and spinach, so forth. However, the onset of glyphosate had some really bad things happen in our gut as a result of it. It started depleting the oxalobacter bacteria that used to create the oxalate-eating bacteria. Why is oxalate such a big deal? Well, guess what? The spike protein also increases oxalate burden by interrupting the calcium oxalate channels, also in the clinical literature. And oxalate feeds on mold. Mold and histamine play together. So now we've got this oxalate, mold, histamine. Mold will disrupt insulin. The histamine will disrupt insulin. So we're starting to see this web, right? And then mold is a lipid, which is a fat, which then again, and so is insulin, called the fat storage hormone. And these oxalates like to wrap themselves in fats, therefore creating kidney stones and gallstones. But not only that, we're seeing the thyroid have much more nodules. We're seeing girls grow cysts the size of their heads in their ovaries. We're seeing lipomas, which are these large fatty deposits under the skin. I just saw someone today, lipomas all over her head to the point where they bleed out. She's got mast cell reactivation syndrome now, which she didn't used to have. And so it's become a big deal. And to add more fuel to the fire, in your point around non-alcoholic fatty liver and cholesterol. So the spike protein has also increased our iron burden. Iron creates oxidative stress and becomes lipid-like, okay? And therefore, we're getting these really high cholesterol numbers because iron creates the reactive oxygen species, ROS, which is the opposite of antioxidants, which then back up the phase 1 liver detoxification pathways, which then increase the histamine and sulfur burden. So I know I'm getting very complex. People's heads are probably spinning by now, but it is all an interrelated web, essentially. And so we can't just look at one thing in isolation. We have to look at them, how they play each other's piano keys.
Well, for everyone listening, if we've lost you, come back. And also, this is the great part of podcasts is you can rewind and replay and rewind and replay and get it in your head, because this stuff is affecting everybody. I don't care how healthy you are. It is with iron. And I know you and I both love Morley Robbins.
Yes.
We are totally copper depleted.
Yes.
Right? Because of the spike protein and because of processed foods, both accelerate copper depletion. And everyone's worried about anemia and iron, taking iron supplements. Well, let's just touch on the importance of copper. It has been, the accelerated scalar copper has been a game changer in a lot of people in my family. Michaela, my daughter, and I both had run anemic, and now there's no issue. So let's touch on copper.
So, and I love all of your products, Sarah, copper, silver, all the products. And we sell a lot of your copper to the point of what you've just spoken is that, and according to Dr. Morley Robbins, whom I adore, he really believes that unless you're having a bleed out on some microscopic level or overt level, that it's very difficult to be anemic, that if you're having low iron, it could be a function of the iron is really caught in your tissues and it's not bioavailable. Copper makes it bioavailable. I had a client whose iron was 2 and her hemoglobin was I think it was 5. But I knew that if she took iron, which the doctors recommended her to take, it would be not a good idea. But they convinced her to have an iron infusion. Well, her iron went to 600. And then she developed Lyme and 2 other autoimmune conditions and started having clots. So giving her iron when the blood work looked scary low on iron and hemoglobin was not the answer. The answer was copper to make the iron bioavailable. And iron as a reactive oxygen species will also stop mitochondrial cellular respiration. It's like the engine. It stops the engine to our cells because we need magnesium and copper to basically fuel our cells, and iron gets in the way. So iron's become really problematic. It's like rusting on the inside. We're recommending for most people, unless you have an overt, literally, bleed out of some nature, men to get phlebotomized or give blood every 2 months and women every quarter because it's important. Too much iron is very, very important. I'm going to the doctor tomorrow, get my annual checkup, and I'm going to see where my iron levels are because I do eat a lot of wild game. But I take your copper in the morning. So.
Yeah, and especially for menopausal women who aren't bleeding anymore.
Right.
So,
right.
Okay, so oxalates, now sulfur. These are the vegetables that when I first came to you, I'm like, I don't understand. I'm so bloated and I'm eating keto and low carb. And I was eating these amazing cabbage and cauliflower and broccoli vegetables with seasoning and garlic and onions oh my gosh, it was so good. But Teri, I took them out of my diet and literally within 2 days, 5 pounds of water weight just went away in my stomach. I could see it again.
Yep. No, sulfur's a big deal. Again, glyphosate, here we go again, that little active ingredient in Roundup that's liberally sprayed on our crops, 300 million pounds a year, interrupts our body's ability to convert sulfur, our healthy sulfur-rich foods, to sulfate, which is the end product. And if you look at my first book, which was written over 15 years ago, I was a very pro-sulfur human being because sulforaphane is important in liver detoxification. It's important in anti-cancer. It's got a lot of phytonutrients. And then it hit a wall. Glyphosate created a wall to getting to the happy part of sulfur. And then instead what happened is we started having these intermediary metabolites. And Sara, through my recent research, sulfur cross-hatches with histamine. So now if you're having a sulfur response, you're also having a histamine response. If you're having a histamine response, you're having a sulfur response. They intersect, and they intersect at that CYP for a family of genes in phase 1 liver detoxification. So you're backing up your liver detox pathways, right? So the liver is like, help me. And taking sulfur, which used to be great, including glutathione as an antioxidant, is no longer in many cases good. I just saw someone right before we went on air. She's had cancer. We've gotten her cancer markers. She's been clean for 4 years. Yet one of her physicians is really proposing glutathione IVs. And I actually read it to her in the clinical literature as an antioxidant. Glutathione can actually increase cancer cells, folks. Okay, so if you have cancer, beware of that. Glutathione is high sulfur. I've had a client that had just deforming psoriasis. This beautiful woman, you couldn't even see her face. She was taking glutathione IVs to manage her strep, and it was literally deforming her from a psoriatic perspective. We took away the glutathione, we took away the sulfur, she got herself back. So it's a big deal. Sulfur and histamine, big intersection. So if you have sulfur sensitivity, you're more likely going to have to avoid both sulfur and high histamine foods. If you have high histamine sensitivity, you're going to have to avoid both histamine and sulfur foods right now, especially in the world of this pandemic.
Okay, 2 questions. So if I were to have my amazing vegetables that I had 4 years ago, I probably would not just be bloated, but I'd probably be itching on the inside as well. So my symptoms would have been double whammy. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Yes. My daughter just recently had COVID, She's never had a panic attack. She's never had a histamine response, and her heart rate went to 200 and she passed out. So that's a big deal. Her sulfur, her sulfur and her histamine. She'd had octopus and she'd had some sulfur vegetables. Now that seems to be like a good food, but octopus is high histamine, and the sulfuric compounds, because she had like a cabbage slaw, right, trying to be healthful, and it really wrecked her. And we're seeing that a lot, including myself. I was having mahi tacos in September when I was in San Diego recently. And the first day was great. And I really wanted that second day of this taco. It was so fresh that it was being pulled right out of the ocean. And I had his response the second day. So charcoal was my go-to. And I always carry it now. I always suggest for everyone, unless you have a charcoal allergy, carry charcoal in your purse. It will save you. It will save you. And now I make my daughter, if she chooses to have charcoal with her at all times.
Now with the new formula that is Teri approved. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited. It doesn't have the psyllium anymore, but it has the charcoal, the zeolite, and I am now doing what you did. So for Super Bowl last night, I had some grain-fed beef. They're beef ribs, and they're my favorite meal going down. But I took a scoop of that before the meal, and I took a scoop of it before going to bed. So, and I feel fine today. But back to the sulfur. So sulfur is so good for us. Glutathione is so good for us. These are anti-cancerous foods. If we're not taking them in, how do we get the sulfur the body needs?
That's really good question. So wild game, because meat contains sulfur as well, but it has obviating amino acids, because it's a full amino acid profile to manage that burden. And you can dance with sulfur as long as you're taking some other obviating, a DAO enzyme if you have a DAO deficiency, charcoal if you have that. Quercetin is amazing as a mast cell stabilizer and an antioxidant. Many people we're recommending H1, H2 blockers, antihistamines here and there. But really, really great question. But meat has the sulfur components.
Okay.
Egg, if you can manage it, is also high in sulfur. Garlic, if you can manage it, is also high in sulfur. So is onion. So we call this the hierarchy of needs. So garlic, if you cook it down or you roast it, it can be gentler on the system and still impart sulfur and impart antibacterial qualities as well. Similarly with onion. With me, onion though gives me a headache. I can do garlic, onion. It's for me, it's a no-go right now. It's very rare.
And that's a good point, where some of these sulfur foods or some of these oxalate foods you might be able to handle, but you might not be able to handle other ones. And everyone's individual. And that's what I love about you, is that you talk about your current state of health. And there's I probably am fine right now having fish. I probably would be okay. I take a histamine enzyme, and I take your wild lights. I take your immune mover, and we'll talk about those in the stress mover as well. And when I'm having tomato sauce with some low carb pasta to go with my bison meatballs that are amazing, and everyone in my family loves them, so it's a winner. But I will take those supplements and I'm fine and I feel great. Sometimes I'm okay with onions, but definitely not garlic. For me, I can't do garlic. It will rock me, and it's not worth it. And the breath, it's not worth it either.
Well, exactly. And that's why we're all different. And so when you start getting really clear feedback from the body, then you can make an informed decision. But when there's so much noise, you don't know what's what. And so that's why it's really eating to your genetic blueprint and your current state of health will give you that direct, clear guidance.
And I love that.
It's yours.
So I mention to people, unless they're able to go to you and get a full print up of what they're allowed to eat, I tell them, just for a couple weeks, eliminate the oxalates, the sulfur, the amyloids, and then introduce your favorite food back in for 3 days, and just one, and see if you react. Your body's going to tell you. But when you are a garbage can, you don't know what you're responding to. Your body's totally numb and inflamed, and you don't know any different, right? So, okay. we talked about sulfur, we talked about oxalates, amyloids. How do they play with histamines?
Oh, wow. Amyloids are such a big deal. Okay, I just want to pause there. Amyloids are a big deal. What are amyloids? These are indigestible proteins that are contributing to Alzheimer's, to cancer, to mental health, to cyst building, to viral reactivation, contributing to autoimmunity. It's a really, really big deal. In this country, 1 in 14 individuals have been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. That's a pre-COVID number. So right now, you can probably double it and then some. And so why? Well, again, that's darn spike protein. I call it the disrupted mirror effect. So as I was writing the Wilditarian book about protein, sulfur, oxalate, and fat, I did not know that the spike protein would have the same mirror effect and what it does. So, and again, this is all in the clinical literature. Now we know that the spike protein has 7 vectors of amyloid genesis. So it helps create amyloids. And then amyloids have all these downstream impacts that I just noted. It's a big freaking deal. So if we are not wild and eating to our genetic blueprint in our current state of health, but clearly not wild, we are fire striking this amyloid burden, which can kill you because the amyloid fibrils, right, can lead to stroke and heart attack, pulmonary embolism. And then the amyloids make oxalates, and the oxalates make amyloids, and the iron makes amyloids. Again, it's this web. And somehow I've made this discovery, but that's why we are so pioneering in getting people to resolve the diabetes. We just had an MS resolution complete where the lesions on this person's spinal cord and brain disappeared. And this person who wasn't walking is now dancing and has got a 6-pack 6 months into our process. We've just had somebody who had hearing loss that was told it was permanent. And a couple of weeks on this process, they got 4 levels of hearing back because a viral reactivation, in this case, varicella, which also has been clinically linked to be fire started by the spike protein. Varicella has been known to manage hearing loss, to increase hearing loss, and the oxalates were creating tinnitus, also disrupting hearing. So we have like actual evidence, and this gentleman's doctor said you will never get your hearing back, right? So it's a big freaking deal.
So just to be clear, everyone, these amyloids are in that healthy white chicken that has no fat and full of protein that you think the bodybuilders are using, right? They're eating the broccoli and the chicken, and it's in the conventionally raised beef, turkey, pork. I get the question all the time, Teri, from people that live in the Midwest. I raise my own chickens. Are those okay?
I think they're definitely better. We need to know who their mama hen was, right? Because chickens we know the DNA is transferred generationally. So if it's heritage, it's much better, right? So if you can get a chicken that is super clean and you don't have a farm right next to you that is mass producing chickens, again, I haven't proven this, but chickens communicate by sonar because they're part of the aviary species. And so do the aviary communicate by sonar. That's how they fly in formation. And what we've learned is that certain living things can transfer DNA. There's been some research done on sunflowers where they come to look at each other and then they can transfer DNA. So I'm hypothesizing, why are chickens dirty birds, even if they're clean birds? Well, again, hypothetical, don't know, can't prove it, but that's my informed hypothesis. And also the generational DNA that could be passed down. Definitely better. But chicken is the dirtiest of birds because of its crowding. It's the most crowded. The chickens are raised to be killed, right? So they fatten them up and then they kill them. They fatten them up and then they kill them and they squish them. And so there's a lot of DNA that's being transferred more over and more over. So it's a big deal. I can honestly say I have not had one piece of chicken in 7 years. Not one freaking chicken.
I haven't either. I am not for a vegan diet, but if that's the only thing at a restaurant, I will have a vegan meal for sure. So it definitely, and before I even knew you, chicken would always spark the E. coli in my system to just rev up, and I would get bloated and constipated. I'm like, I just had a piece of chicken. I even think it was organic. And every single time. And now I know why.
Yeah, it's been linked to E. coli. It's an omega-6 inflammatory fatty acid. It's just not a clean bird anymore. If you go to France and you do coq au vin from a small provider in a farm where they don't have, I believe France has outlawed glyphosate too. So that would probably be okay. But I did recently go to France and I just couldn't bring myself to eat chicken.
Yeah. Well, look at it. It's white. It has no nutrition in it. I mean, why? It doesn't even taste as good as the wild game that we're talking about. But okay, so say we're not eating our chicken or the amyloid proteins, but the spike protein is creating amyloids in our body. So even if we're doing all the right things, how do we break down the amyloids in our body?
Well, there's lots of literature on this. Serrapeptase has been known. It's a proteolytic enzyme, serrapeptase nanokinase, to kind of chew them up. We also, salt is very good. It's not clinically been researched, but I find that anything that is a biofilm breaker and emulsifier is very, very important. There's been some clinical literature on methylene blue and the spike protein. So if you're denaturing the spike protein by its very nature, you're going to denature some amyloids. So it's a really big deal. Enzymes. You've got to break down those protein structures, and don't feed the burden in the body with more amyloids. So it's a real deal. It's a real deal. So if we want to have a longevity play, and we're eating a lot of protein, which is now, strength training and protein is really hot right now. We've got to make sure we're eating to our genetic blueprint and our current state of health and minimizing that amyloid burden, because it's going to be so hard on the kidneys over time. And I just have this feeling that kidneys are going to be the big next organ to go, we're seeing already in my practice a lot of renal dysfunction in the blood work. But I mean, I'm concerned about dialysis down the road because there's so much protein that we're having to manage.
So is that from the dirty bird type protein, or is that just overall protein? Because we need the protein for muscle strength and for our brain and our hair and our nails. And like you're saying, you got to get in your grams, right? And I've even messaged you. A lot of people are doing creatine and protein shakes or just amino acids. What is your take on that? And is it, because the protein gurus are saying, oh, you can have more than 30 grams at a time. It's not hard on your kidneys. And then you've got the old school people that are saying, nope, you should not be having more than 30 to 40 grams. That is hard on your kidneys. Or does it depend on the person's kidney health?
Absolutely. So yes to all of the above. So we need to be bio-individual. One, if you're going to eat a lot of protein, make it wild, folks. It's so much easier to break down. So much easier. Today I had crab cakes that were left over from last night, and I took an antihistamine so I wouldn't have a histamine response. I had it with salad, right? And peppers, yellow peppers, which my body loves, and really high in vitamin C. Now I eat bison, I eat lamb. I'm very protein dominant, right? My body likes it. My body doesn't like a lot of beans. It just doesn't. It ferments, and my glucose metabolism changes. But if I eat beef and I have a continuing glucose monitor, I'll go hypoglycemic because my body can't break it down. If I eat pork that's not wild, I'll go hypoglycemic. That's my telltale sign. So continuing glucose monitor is a really good way to manage the situation and get your renal function checked. Renal function will tell you if you're having elevated albumin, creatinine, if you have protein in your urine, if you're at the high end of protein on the scale, the range of protein, you're probably straining your kidneys. If you sweat and you see yellow or you have ammonia smell, that is the end product of uric acid metabolism gone haywire and undigested protein. The body speaks. If you start burping a lot after having a ton of protein, that means you didn't break it down. So you need digestive enzymes. You need hydrochloric acid for that protein digestion. You need glycine, which is super important to manage protein, which, by the way, glyphosate also hijacks. That's why we're more protein malabsorbed from another vector. So amino acids are great. My body loves whey protein. I don't have an issue with high L-glutamine, which whey contains, and I don't have candida and those things that whey can tend to exacerbate. But if you do, that's not great. My body does not like pumpkin seed protein, doesn't like it. It's too much hormone centric for me. Egg white protein, no, because it's got albumin and that's to renal function. But I really like the whey protein. So those work for me. I love my collagen peptides. Even though collagen tends to be a little histamine, my body really likes the marine collagen. And so you have to lean into what is it. My body though, however, does not like actual amino acids as a supplement. It makes my kidneys hurt. It's too acidic. But I'll take in amino acids through the whey protein and through the collagen peptides. So again, if you just had a big dump of amino acids and your lower back hurts, it probably wasn't because you overlifted. Could be your kidneys.
Interesting. I'm having some aha moments right now, Teri. I'm having a little lower back pain, but we've also talked about the fact that sometimes drinking coffee, because coffee is high histamine, can cause my lower back issues. So something to think about. So some of the foods, I just want to run through those real quick. Vinegars, fermented foods, alcohol, aged cheeses, fish, bone broth. Everyone's on the bone broth kick, right?
Yes.
Dairy, grains, avocados, eggplant. Remember, that was the trigger for me when I saw you. I decided to have eggplant for the first time in 3 years, and that did not go over well.
Chickpeas are high histamine when people are eating chickpea pasta. Bananas, high in histamine and latex. Avocado, high in histamine.
And those are the ketogenic healthy foods. So you've got to be careful. Some of these healthy foods are poison to your body. So I want to get into the supplements and what we can do now. I love and I take all three of these. Wild Lights, I take multiple times a day because I work out and I use the sauna, and we are so depleted in electrolytes. So let's talk about how this not only is amazing for your body and detox, but also for histamines.
Yeah, so I love Wild Lights. And actually the woman with the mast cell reactivation syndrome that walked into my practice today, I had to give her Wild Lights in real time because when I put egg white in her field, because we do apply kinesiology, she started feeling sick. She's very viral. And she's like, oh my gosh, I love the smell of this. She'd never had Wild Lights before. It's amazing. I've had little babies that can walk and they'll walk over and they'll point at it. The mothers say they can't get enough of it. These are babies that were born in utero and then born with massive mold sensitivity because there was a big mold exposure in their house while this woman was pregnant. His name is Trip. He is my wild child, and she says he can't get enough of Wild Lights. So this is even safe for babies. I work with an autistic child that he has been in my practice for 10 years. He wasn't able to talk. Now he can talk. He calls it drinky, the drinky. And it's amazing for oxalate metabolism. It's amazing for histamine response. It's amazing for rehydration. It's incredible for uric acid metabolism. It's so happy on the liver, unless you have an allergy to cilantro or watermelon or sea salt. And sea salt, again, will not raise, you guys, it may not raise your blood pressure. We've been told that salt raises blood pressure, not if it's the right kind of salt. Not if it's the right kind of salt.
No, I actually just did a podcast and a blog on the benefits of Himalayan salt and the accelerated ancient salt and it's got over 62 minerals in it. This is my electrolyte drink during my workout. And it has been proven that just by using salt as your pre-workout, you can work out at least an additional 21 minutes. So go try that,
Amazing.
athletes out there, right?
It's also an adrenal supporter. That's why.
Right.
Salt
And
supports adrenal function.
And for all of us mental people that are working so hard, your brain needs all those minerals as well, and you're using them up much faster. So
Yes.
I use this all day long. And it's funny that you have watermelon and salt in here, because my kids, one of their favorite snacks after their workouts is taking real watermelon and putting the salt on it, right? Because it's helping with that lactic acid. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It really does help with lactic acid. And, I work with a lot of athletes, and I work with many people who are on the big stage and travel. They do world tours. They love Wild Lights because it's such a replenisher. And so it's a real game changer. You can even put it in babies' baths. You can make it as part of your skincare. It's so good. It's so good. And it's just a do no harm. And part of anti-aging is we have to have moisture to the skin, but you can put it on your skin as well. So it's just multiple use. You can wear it, you can drink it, you can bathe in it. And it's really good for all ages, truly. So
Well,
very, very multi-use product.
you're giving me an idea, because I use my accelerated iodine with the accelerated scalar castor oil.
Great.
And the castor oil makes the iodine soak in as a mask over my face. But you could also probably use this with the castor oil, because you're feeding your skin. Your skin's your largest organ. You're feeding your skin from the outside and the inside. I love it.
Absolutely. I'll put Wild Lights and salt with a little bit of tea tree oil in my bath. I love it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so the immune mover. I take this especially during, cold and flu season, but how does this help with histamines?
So I call it everyone's new every day because it has so many smart properties. It has Artemisa, which is an anti-parasitic, which will really blow up the histamine. It's got a lot of the anti-pathogens, if you will. It has barberry for blood sugar balancing. It has rosemary. It has the Artemisa and the Pau d'Arco. So in this pandemic, and I have, again, anecdotal evidence from my practice is if people are sick, I take one every day. But if I'm not feeling well, I can go up to 4 a day, and people just avoid getting sick. Again, not making any claims, but I call it your everyone's new every day because it's so broad spectrum in managing our immune system. And so what happens is when we are depleted immunologically, we're going to be more sensitive to those inflammatory agents such as histamine.
Right.
So the more robust we are, the more we can handle the insulin burden, right? When we're less immunologically robust, insulin's going to win.
Right.
Excuse me, not insulin. Histamine is going to win. So histamine is going to win when we are immunologically depleted. So immune system is everything, and it's really great for the gut microbiota. The complement of herbs that I've put in there are very gut friendly.
Amazing. And your gut is everything, right? And if most people are suffering from leaky gut, which is, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
Right. And I agree. The immune system, if your immune system is fighting something over here, then all of these things we're talking about are going to take advantage and go over here. And most people don't die from cancer. They die from a lowered immune system from the treatments that then other things are able to take over. Right?
Yeah, we really got to support. Immunology is everything. And especially in this long play of this pandemic that's ever changing, I call it the flavor of the month. What is it going to look like now? Where this last variant seems to be very, very histamine centric. We've had other variants that had more endocrine dysfunction and more glucose disruption, but now it's sort of like they're layering the cake, if you will. So it's really, really critical for longevity and being on this planet functioning.
So stress mover, and it's not just for stress, but everybody's perceived stress, right, has increased dramatically. And I know you've talked about how the spike protein has actually on its own increased mental health issues. So here we are, we're all depressed, we're all anxious, we're all overstressed, regardless of what's coming at us. This is amazing.
I
And
love stress mover, love it. And it's been called, not by me, the God pill and the chill pill for many of my clients. And so why is this so important, especially in a histamine response? It contains manganese in a small enough amount that is just perfect for managing the histamine response. It contains taurine that is a precursor to dopamine, also calming the system, but it also, taurine helps make bile salts, which help to manage the oxalate histamine burden. It has phosphatidylserine from sunflower lecithin, which calms that whole fight or flight response, which is also part of the histamine response. Has glycine as a precursor to serotonin, which also helps with protein digestion. It just is this little magical combo platter of manage histamine, manage your fight or flight, manage protein digestion, support dopamine, supports serotonin, also has a little bit of rhodiola for adapting those adrenals, because adrenals are the ones that put out the fire of histamine. They create our corticosteroids. And if our adrenals are taxed, if our fight or flight response, when we're stressed, our histamine response is going to be higher and our ability to put out the fire is going to be lower. So we have to manage that fight or flight, also known as the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And we say in my practice, calm the body first before you go and try to do anything else, because if it's on fire, it's fighting against you and it's going to be a lot harder to get to your desired state.
And I love the things that can tell you your biofeedback, like the Aura Ring. I use the Lumen. That's a way to help with your blood sugar and to see where you are with that. And like you were saying, your continuous glucose monitor. Those things are little ways to give you that insight. And if you don't want to do the continuous glucose monitor, just get the regular one and off of Amazon or at the pharmacy, and you can test your blood a couple times a day.
Exactly. And another word on histamine, Sarah, which we haven't touched on, which has really become a big deal, is linked to ADHD. And so many kids now are being put on ADHD medication, and it could be a high histamine response, which then hits the insulin response, which then makes them hypoglycemic. They can't learn, and they get anxious or they get inattentive. And we're being so over medicated. We've used this also for ADHD in kids. Medication is an MAOA gene, but if you don't have an MAOA gene, it's very, very safe.
Yeah. So, most of my kids' friends, just a sample, most of them are on some sort of medication. All of them, all three of them, and all of their friends. So that's just telling you. And then we're not even talking about the processed foods and what that's doing to these kids. So Teri, you're amazing. And you guys can get all of these at Accelerated Health Products. I carry them because I live with them. I take them. My whole family's on them, and I recommend them for everybody. I can tell you electrolyte formulas out there. A lot of them are filled with the ingredients that block those detox pathways that we're talking about. And even in my own family, my husband will take one going, okay, what was in there? My nose is stuffed up and my eyes are blurry, and there's reaction. So I love the supplements. I love your work. What's so exciting about you is that it's ever changing and there's so much more coming, and you are always so on top of it. So God bless you, and thank you for all you do. And Teri, get her book, Wildatarian Diet. Oh my gosh, it's a quick read. It's a Bible. You can use it and refer to it back and forth. I've read it multiple times. And Teri, tell people where they can find you if they want to work with you.
Absolutely. TeriCochrane.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook. It's really, we try to put out so much data because especially now, I feel like I have to get on my soapbox and preach these things because it's little known. And thank you, Sarah, for all your great work in this podcast that can reach so many and really inform and empower. This is not about scaring anyone. This is about giving you your power back, truly.
Absolutely. That's the goal. Because when you go to the doctor, I'm not saying anything negative here, but you don't necessarily get your power back. So you want to be in control, educate yourself, and try to be on top of it so you can help yourself and your family. So thank you, Teri. And thanks everyone else for joining us today. If I can answer any of your questions, you can contact me directly through the website, sarabantahealth.com. Happy to put together a protocol for you. I know this can be overwhelming, but we have to take care of our health, and it's a different job than it was 4 years ago. So join the free group coaching because I teach you on a daily basis. It's the link is below on Telegram, and you will be a part of an amazing like-minded group. You can ask me your questions on a daily basis. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram under Accelerated Health Products across over 100 channels under Accelerated Health TV and Radio Show. And as I mentioned, my goal is to reach everyone on earth with eyes to see and ears to hear my message of healing. I cannot do it alone. Help me with that goal. Share this podcast with a few of your friends who may need our help. Join us every week, Mondays at 2 p.m. Pacific, Tuesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific, and you can find the supplements at sarabantahealth.com. Use coupon WELCOME10 for 10% off site-wide. Thanks again for joining us here, and have a great week.